How do you balance being commercial yet authentic? And what if your work is beautiful, surreal yet provocative, like the incredible work of Lucie Smailes? I went to speak to her to find out. I'm artist Sarah Vartsy, and this is how to be creative and stay positive at the end of the world.
So this is a pun on WhatsApp. So obviously the dolly's using an old phone and it's called What's Up instead of WhatsApp. So a whole series of dollies, they're called doing dollies. And they're all doing things that a lot of the kids these days wouldn't understand. This is the mirror of high self-esteem. So that when you look in the mirror and you feel like shit, and you've got self-repulsion, it gives you a hug and says, I love you.
So tell me how all of this came to be.
Well, Sarah, I think I've always collected 1950s objects. Probably when I was 13, 14, I came across this Pat Boone 7-inch singles holder. And it had blue plastic with little handles like a handbag. And this couple on the front in 50s outfits listening to records. And I was just automatically drawn to the colours, graphics, shape. And I have been ever since.
And I think that's why I was drawn to your work, because obviously that's a big thing for me as well. Like the 50s and the colourful side. And also all your work, it does have this sort of kitsch yet sinister angle that really appeals to me.
Yeah. It's like when I create an assemblage, I'll use really beautiful looking objects or, beautiful colours, so that it has that kind of fun, kind of pulls the viewer in with the aesthetics of it. And then, as they're immediately drawn to it. And then, you take a closer look and there's some really dark stuff going on in there. And I really like that dichotomy. All the levels are hiding underneath this kind of beautiful aesthetics. But also, of course, that is an important thing for me as well. I love beautiful things. I love to be around beautiful things. And I suppose that's where the arts come from, is that I've always been surrounded by objects, being a collector. Also, when I looked into the psychology of collectors, a lot of stuff comes up about loss. And when people have had a very big loss in their lives, one way to kind of play that out is to collect. And with collecting, one is never enough. You've always got to have the next and the next. And it just goes on and on and on. So you've got this constant yearning.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Because your flat is full of amazing collections. Is there any one thing that, if there was a fire and you had to grab one object in your flat, could you pick one?
Well, I would pick my Gohonzon, because I'm a Buddhist.
Oh, okay. I don't actually know what that is.
Gohonzon is a scroll. And it's Japanese Sanskrit, and it says Nam-myoho Renge Kyo down the centre in Japanese. And even though it's an actual object, a scroll, piece of paper, it is the kind of material manifestation of Buddhahood. So I chant to it. And the thing about, all objects, in a way, sometimes I get quite depressed at the thought of being surrounded by all these objects because, if I was given 2 months to live, all these objects would mean nothing. But my Gohonzon...
You mean to other people?
No, to me.
Oh,
if I thought I had 2
I
months
see.
left, would I be happy to sit in my room and look at all these objects? No, I wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that I would do is get my Gohonzon and chant to, have the most fulfilling last 2 months of my life. It's a dichotomy, it's a battle all the time because I know that even though, this has a really positive aspect to it, all this collecting and beautiful objects and how I put the objects together, it also has a downside as well, which is it can become quite destructive because I will shut people out and it will be my safe place with the objects, just me and the objects.
So because you've got a lot of dolls and things, it's almost like they are your extended family? Could you say that?
I think people often ask me about the dolls because I do use dolls' heads in a lot of pieces, and sometimes galleries say to me, you know, I don't want any of your art with the dolls' heads, which is kind of 75%.
Have you asked them why?
Because they find them scary. I can think of at least 2 gallery owners, 2 women who
won't
have them because of
that.
that.
A bit like clowns.
Yeah, it's a bit like the Chucky
clowns.
doll, you know, that's kind of got that dark, sinister edge to it.
Mm.
But one of the reasons I work with dolls' heads is because, you know, in other cultures, and also go back 50 years when, you know, there were no computers, internet, blah, 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 smartphones. And, you know, children were told stories and myths. And, you know, these are kind of myths that have been going on for generations and generations and handed down. And within those myths and stories, you know, are some universal answers to a lot of the questions that we all have on a deep level. And dolls were used as, you know, they were really sacred, and they were like intermediaries between the living and the dead. There was something very spiritual. Also, you know, in other cultures...
A bit like effigies. Do you think that kind of...
Yeah, but the word effigy to me, it kind of makes it a bit sinister. It's almost like...
You said the dolls are kind of... I mean, it is interesting that there's the sort of the childish sort of kids playing with dolls. Like, I'll say something quite interesting happened that we have a broken doll.
Yeah.
We have several with missing arms and legs. And I thought, right, I'm decluttering, I'm going to put the doll in the bin. And I put it in the bin, and about an hour later I thought, I can't face this idea of the doll in the bin because it looks like a baby. So I took it out of the bin again. I couldn't cope with it being... Yeah. It's a bit like books. Like, I wouldn't throw a book away either. Tell me a bit about how you first started making art.
Okay, so I've been a single parent for a long time. And when I say single parent, 24/7. I didn't have a partner coming to get them. I was very young. I was drinking a lot. I'd had issues. It was, you know, as a single parent, very isolating, lonely. I didn't feel that I was resourced very much. And my drinking got heavier. And then eventually, you know, fast forward a few years, I went into recovery and started art therapy. And I just got everything out of this big bag that I used to carry around. It was like a skip. So, you know, I'd never empty it. It would just kind of get bigger and bigger. And I got up on the table and made this kind of installation with everything in my bag. And it was like a kind of a real aha moment of, oh my God, this is right for me to express myself in this way, to put objects together. And also, you know, each object has its own energy. And when you put those energies together, you create a different energy. And so, you know, from that day, that's what I started to do. And then, you know, and I was lacking in confidence and self-esteem, all of that kind of thing. And I started this foundation course. And, you know, one of the first things that I did, which they weren't very happy about, was a pile of tea bags, used tea bags, you know, once you've made the tea and got them out. So it was a pile of used tea bags and then a piece of loo roll on the top with period stains on it.
Oh, wow, okay.
And that was, you know, and they had to mark my work. So there were like 4 tutors standing there looking at this, you know.
What was your thought? See, at my art college, they would have loved that. That would have scored very
Really?
highly. Yes. The sort of work, the more provocative and meaningful work we made, you know, anything remotely crowd pleasing would have been scored very low.
Yeah.
So they would have loved that.
Yeah.
But what was your thought behind the tea bags?
Well, at the time, you know, I was very early in recovery. I had 2 children on my own, no money. You know, I was struggling a lot mentally. I had a lot of hormone problems. And for me, it just epitomised where I was, just drinking tea after tea, you know, feeling a bit mental in the head, always struggling
Was
with...
it 28 tea bags, like, for every day of...
No, it wasn't that considered.
Wasn't that, no. It's okay.
And then, you know, so they kind of ignored that. Nobody said anything to me about it because it was alongside some other bits of work that I'd done. But for me, that was like, you know, it just felt really immediate and uncontrolled. And I loved it. You know, and the bit of tissue was in the shape of a vagina because it had been in my knickers.
Perhaps it's also like your current work where from a distance you wouldn't think, and then as you get closer you sort of have that, this is what I'm actually looking at.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is what I try and do with my work.
You know, for example, there's a suitcase there called Doll Porn, and the backdrop in the suitcase is actually an image from a 1930s children's book. The teddy has got a spliff. The doll is drinking a glass of wine. This is genuinely a children's book. And the whole story, the whole book was just like, anyway, so I used this as the backdrop to Doll Porn, where these 2 dolls, you know, she's just given him a blowjob and her arm's fallen off and her bra's fallen down. And it's got a little light in it, and it's kind of all red and frilly because it's kind of boudoir-y, but it's so wrong. You know, I love to do wrong things.
Kind of, yeah, my work, that's what I try and aim for. So with my Trump portrait and the 3 portraits, you know, having him like grinning at you and yet kind of being eaten alive by the insects.
Oh, it's incredible.
To have that contrast where at first I wanted them to look like tribute portraits that they could have commissioned, but then it's kind of like I have the last laugh by putting the insects in there.
I can do really nice, sophisticated, lovely work. But when people see my work, because I've done a few shop window displays recently.
And you had to tone it down a little bit.
And one of the women said, she was a bit tentative, and she said, oh, I don't really want, you know, the kind of doll art that you do. And I said, look, listen, you know, I can actually do nice, beautiful work. For instance, when my mum got lung cancer, and I made her this kind of, almost like a talisman, really. So it was the bust of a woman, and over the lung and the heart was a fish. It was kind of cut out inside, a fish eating all the cancer, because that's what she visualised.
A fish?
Yeah, she visualised, and she's still in remission now, and we're talking 4 years later. She visualised a fish eating the cancer. So I then put that into this assemblage, and then it had, you know, those old weighing scales that had a really lovely big magnifying piece over the numbers.
I think so, yes.
So you could see the numbers really clearly. So I took out one of those big magnifiers, put it over the fish that was eating the cancer, and I used crystal as the cancer. And so it's this beautiful black, what's it called? Torso. Beautiful black torso with just this one big magnified circle with a fish and crystal. And it just looks really beautiful and really simple. You know, and it really helped her. And that a lot of the time I make assemblages, and the right people get them for the things that they're going through. For me, the biggest challenge is being able to stay true to myself and what I want to make, versus being able to financially survive and not prostitute myself and make work that will sell to the Joe public.
That is I
I think that's the biggest challenge.
So for example, when I started my belly button photography project, my original thought was that firstly, how can I be creative when I've got the kids and I don't have that much time? And I thought, well, I can take pictures of my belly button, and I have sold some prints of those images already, and I have thought, well, I have a choice now. I could try and get interest in erotic, beautiful pictures of my belly button, but actually, funnily enough, however much I would think that's the sensible direction, I can't do that anymore. And so very quickly I've started, having baked beans on my belly button, and all sorts of things intermixed with some that you would call more crowd pleasing, I suppose. And so I haven't just stuck with, oh, well, this will sell and this will be attractive, because I kind of just believe that other people get me and see my vision. And I think what I would find difficult is if someone approached me and said, well, I really love this style, can you make 20 more similar images? I'll get back to you if someone does ask me to do that. But I am trying to find ways of being authentic that have sold in the past, and really tapping into those particular things.
When I start work on something, I can't talk to anyone about it because it's so
personal.
It's so personal, but it's just like holding it in a safe place and not allowing anyone else's judgment, ideas. It's about really nurturing it in a safe place, and for things to come in and go out when they want to. I mean, we all work differently, and not one way isn't better than the other. It's what works for you. But I do find that if I start talking about it to people, I lose the power in it.
There is something to be said for that, definitely.
And I've done it before, where I've, told all, and I've gone into it in detail, and you know what's happened? I've moved on and done something else.
Yeah, that is what seems to happen.
Because I've given it away.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because you're right, that's something I have to learn. And I can't wait to have a look around the rest of your studio. I'm very excited to see what else is in here. So
it's really lovely to have you here, Sarah.
Thanks, and thanks a lot for showing all your amazing work and speaking to me.
Thank you.
You've been watching How to Be Creative and Stay Positive with me, Sarah Vartsey. One of the things I really admire in creative people is if they are brave and they try and push boundaries. So stay tuned to see one of Lucie Smailes' slightly more adult pieces. And don't forget to subscribe for more interviews, tips and advice.
It's now in the garden at my caravan. Just kind of all the plastic roses fading with colour.
What inspired you to make it?
Well, I used to frequent, because of my collecting, I used to go to this wholesale flower merchandiser. And when somebody dies and you get the green, what's it called? The green letters, Nan, Dad.
Yeah.
And they put fresh flowers and they go in a hearse.
Yeah.
So I was like, yes, looking at all these letters, yes, I'm going to do one with cunt. And, there's a lot of stuff behind it, but yeah.